Hi, I'm Debbie Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America, Can We Talk? Today, we're going to talk about COVID, no success allowed, and Steve Moore may be joining me. Steve Moore, formerly of the Heritage Foundation, Wall Street Journal, now doing Unleashed Prosperity. Pretty sure he's going to join us in just a few minutes. And Kenosha, Wisconsin, LeBron, Terrell, and facts. And of course, I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth. America Can We Talk is sponsored by GC Works, a Dallas-based company performing advanced technology research in the oil and gas industry.
Hello again and welcome to America Can We Talk and to today's First Five. I'm Debbie Georgatos. So we've talked previously many times about the idea that hydroxychloroquine as a cure for COVID has been successful in many different experiments. Many times they've showed it. We've talked about that many times on the show. And yet you cannot get the mainstream media to acknowledge it. You get social media gets shut down. My own show has had shows pulled down, blocked for, statements you're not allowed to make on social media. So hydroxychloroquine, as something like, whatever it is, 52 tests have been done around the world, showing that it works and helps COVID patients. Recently, and the media ignores that. So recently, there's been more discussion about the idea. President Trump actually mentioned the idea that plasma, the blood plasma treatment of people who have recovered from COVID-19, President Trump recently mentioned that this was looking to be a promising manner of promising treatment, that people suffering from COVID-19 actually were finding getting better using blood plasma. So let me tell you what, do you think the media very happy about this? I'm gonna give you a quick background on the Washington Post and their coverage on this issue. As far back as March 27th, so we're just really in the midst of it, we're really in the big throes of the shutdown. Washington Post says, blood from people who recover from coronavirus could provide a treatment. Washington Post, March 27th. And this is just 2 weeks after the World Health Organization declared COVID a pandemic. And then you have, just over a week later, Washington Post reports again, while there's no vaccine yet for COVID-19, we do have one potentially promising treatment to help people infected with the coronavirus. Infusions of antibody-rich plasma from other patients who've had the disease and recovered. Then again in June 18th of 2020, Washington Post reports a large study of 20,000 hospitalized COVID-19 patients who received transfusions of blood plasma from people who recovered found the treatment was safe and suggests giving to people early in the disease may be beneficial. Blood plasma from people who recovered is a safe COVID-19 treatment, study says. Fast. And so then actually after that, before we lose track, one more, earlier this month, 4 former FDA commissioners wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post arguing blood plasma taken from people who've recovered from COVID might be the COVID-19 treatment we need. Fast forward, President Trump makes reference to the idea that actually, it just may turn out that we have an effective treatment for COVID-19 in the blood plasma of patients who have recovered from COVID-19. Well, so he mentions that, and then so that was Trump. Then according to the FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn, plasma treatments reduce mortality of COVID-19 by 35%. So they're still out there, but Trump says this, and lo and behold, Washington Post is having second thoughts about all of this. Now that Trump has said blood plasma might work really well, you have this statement about scientists express doubts about coronavirus treatment touted as breakthrough by Trump. Said a headline this week, Monday. So Post, months on end, story after story. It's great. This could be a real breakthrough. Trump says something. All of a sudden, Washington Post is giving thumbs down, doubt, concern. People, you have to understand the Democrat mob, the Democrat media mob, left-wing America, they do not want COVID to go away. Because if COVID goes away, if we discover the treatments, many of them now being discussed by doctors all over the world, are somehow effective in stopping this pandemic, and it's not even a pandemic anymore in America, the numbers are so low, then all of a sudden everything can open up. All of a sudden they don't have a finger of blame to point at President Trump. All of a sudden the economy comes roaring back because President Trump is going to rely on President Trump's economy is going to come back because of the policies that made the economy work well to start with are going to be used again. The economy is going to come back, and all of a sudden the Democrats are really sunk. So to finish on Washington Post, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration decision, gave emergency authorization for convalescent plasma, they call it convalescent plasma, as a treatment for novel coronavirus patients, touted as a historic breakthrough by President Trump on Sunday, is raising doubts among some experts who say the therapy has not been adequately tested. This reminds me of the thing we talked about a few days ago, where you had the Yale expert, world-renowned epidemiologist on Mark Levin's show, Dr. Risch, who's saying hydroxychloroquine is working wonders. Why aren't we using it? And you just have the insanity of not being of the government and left-wing sources not being willing to say it works. And all of a sudden the FDA is saying, well, we're not too sure. Same kind of argument, haven't been adequately tested. The urgency of the crisis has elided with a false sense we should skip over rigorous studies of interventions because we don't have enough time. Okay, people are dying. I mean, less people are dying, fewer are dying, we're doing better. But people find treatments that work. The Post thought it was fine for months, and all of a sudden, because President Trump says on Sunday and again on Monday, hey, this is looking really good, all of a sudden, Post is like, well, we're not really too sure about that. Never mind. So I have to tell you, even Michael Caputo, the Health and Human Services Department Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs, said, wait a minute, Washington Post, look at all these stories you said here, and all of a sudden you're saying, never mind. You just have to understand, people, these people do not want to have a cure for COVID. They don't want to have treatments that are effective. They don't want to have hydroxychloroquine. They don't want to have inhaled budesonide using a nebulizer. They don't want this new oleandrin thing. Anything that might work, not only and make cases go away, make people better, but cause the fear and panic to drop in the populace, the American people. The left, they can't have it. They just cannot have fear end. You cannot have fear end, because if people get back out in the world and they reopen their businesses and they go to their companies and go to their jobs and they eat in restaurants and shop at the mall and do normal American things, and the economy comes roaring back, the left has nothing to whine about and complaining about President Trump. This is the entire reason that you're seeing Washington Post back off from this story. Simply unbelievable, simply impermissible, just not good enough for the American people. And it is an outrage, and people ought to be complaining about this all over the country. In fact, by the way, on the closing out the first five, so in the great state of Texas, we have a Texas Supreme Court justice, a woman, and she and her husband actually both contracted COVID-19. Both were home. I don't know the treatments they used, but whatever they used, they're all better. They're all back on track, back at work, and they have been regularly donating plasma and being very public about it, because they're trying to encourage other people. If you've been through coronavirus and you've gotten better, donate your plasma. This is life-saving, a life-saving thing to do. So you have all that energy coming out of the side who's saying this is great, a new treatment, an effective treatment, let's all go for it. And the Washington Post trying to throw cold water all over it because it just might help President Trump bring the economy back, bring the American spirit even more back, help people drop fear. And the last thing they can stand is anything that might actually help President Trump and actually help the American people. Pretty sick when you think about the Washington Post acknowledging this works months on end, and then all of a sudden saying, oh, no, when it's really here. It's kind of like they care more about assuring the defeat of President Trump than they do about the lives and health of the American people. That, my friends, is sick. And that, my friends, is today's First Five. So earlier today, so I was texting with Steve Moore. I don't know what he's doing. He was going to try to join us today, and But we don't have him yet, so I'm going to go forward and just tell you what I was going to talk to him about. And if we hear from him, we'll get him right on with us. In fact, I am just going to tell him. Anyway, so what I want to tell you is, so Steve Moore, you know that name. He is in fact, we have a picture of him. Steve Moore was a Washington, he was with the Wall Street Journal for a long time, the Heritage Foundation. He's actually on a little bit of a break from Heritage Foundation. The reason, in part, he's on a break from Heritage Foundation is because he founded something called Unleash Prosperity. So Steve Moore, there's Steve Moore. You have Steve Moore, leave his picture up there for a second. And you have other people he founded the Unleash Prosperity with, Dr. Arthur Laffer, who great economist Steve Forbes, Phil Kerpen, John Decker, founded this Unleash Prosperity thing. And the idea of it is to continue to urge to the American people that you don't have to, we should not be making policy decisions about COVID-19 and shutting down America and shutting down and naming businesses unessential. You shouldn't be making those huge policy decisions just based on the predictions about contagion rates made by people like Drs. Fauci and Birx, that you have to be weighing in with other factors such as impact on people who are shut in, can't get out, impact on the mental health of people, impact on the just American society, the economy, people losing businesses, having businesses they spent decades building up collapse because they're closed, deemed unessential. These guys try to pull together a lot of data to make the argument, basically, that we should not be in this country down the path of just saying, as long as Fauci and Birx say we have to stay closed because COVID might spread, that we're all just going to do that. We have to have other people participating in, weighing in, and whose views being considered in reaching policy decisions about whether to shut our country down. So they launched that. If you don't get their emails, they have a great daily email, weekly, whatever it is, Unleash Prosperity. You can Google that. It's a great weekly email. And the reason I wanted to have him on today, and I'm just going to say what he was going to say, so I'm going to tell you anyway. But he's got a great piece out today. And I want to mention some important things about it. Because as I mentioned on the show, I think it was Tuesday of this week, there is a rising tide of people saying, I'm really sick and tired of this shutdown. I want you, government, to justify it. In fact, we played that great video. The guy, a gentleman a veteran, American veteran who lives in California, in Shasta County, California, talking to the county government and basically saying, you know, you need to stop. We're Republican up here. This is a red country. Why are you shutting down our country? Why are you doing our county? Why are you doing this? Why do we still have masks on? Why are we still part of this process of just shutting the country down, as though our county down, as though there is nothing to be, as though there's no other solution? And he really took them to task. I'm sorry, I'm trying to do this quick thing here. Excuse me. Okay. So Steve Moore, so the guy who spoke at that hearing is basically warning the people who he was talking to, you're going to have a revolution on your hands. This is what he said, basically. And if you didn't see that, I urge you to go back to Tuesday's show, listen to that clip. I got emails from around the country, people saying, thank you for playing that clip. I've sent it to my congressman. I've sent it to my county commissioner's court. People are livid and sick of the idea that they do not have the freedom to live their lives, walk around freely, without masks, have a normal life back. So I want to say that what I'm about to tell you kind of segues and plays into that mindset. Because I can tell you, where I live in Dallas, Texas, so you all might think Texas is really a conservative place. Dallas is land of the Democrats, run by Democrats, and we have a very draconian set of regulations regularly being spewed out by our Democrat County Commissioner Court, which is the largest entity running Dallas County. New rules, new regulations, threats of rules, demands that people do this. I mean, they're just running this as though we were in the middle of the bubonic plague, and we're not. And so you have people pointing out data, arguing with, saying, hey, actually your data doesn't justify what you're forcing us to do. But we have not been able to penetrate. We have not been able to penetrate that and to my sense, it is leftists have figured out this is a way we can put things into place, a way to be tyrannical, a way to control the people. And even if you think even if you think that, well, it's not really that they want to be tyrannical, they're just being cautious. They're just being careful. Why can't you cut them a break? They're trying to protect us. People, it is not the job of the government to keep you healthy. It is not the job of the government to keep you safe. We should have police to keep you safe with respect to crime. With respect to crime, you have to have, military to keep you safe because of military invasions or because we have military actions to carry out around the country. But the job of the government at any level is not to make sure that you are healthy, to put rules in place to keep you safe from viruses. It's just not the job of government. And I will tell you that the level of frustration in America is growing and growing because the justification given by the government to start with, why we have to shut down the entire country, to start with was, back in March, well, we're going to shut this down because we need to flatten the curve, because we need to have enough hospital beds available. And so, if everyone gets infected at once and we all go to the hospital and we run out of ICU beds and we run out of hospital beds, we're going to be in terrible shape. So to slow the spread, to flatten the curve being the curve of how many people have it, to flatten the curve, slow the spread, everybody has to stay home and wear masks. Okay, so this was back in March. That was a long time ago. March is long past. We're getting toward the end of August, and we're still wearing masks and socially distancing, and restaurants can't open. And in Texas, we have all sorts of ridiculous rules about our freedom. And so there are people, and in Dallas County, I was just reading, we have like 34% of hospital beds are unused, and the same thing, 34% or more of ICU beds are open. We don't have a crisis. And I'm getting around to saying there are people looking at the numbers, recognizing this never was a pandemic. We have more people dying of the flu than of COVID. We have a 99% survival rate. We have solutions to COVID all over the place that the government's repressing. And the people are saying, enough repressing my freedom. Now I want to get to what Steve Moore put in his Unleashed Prosperity mailing that I thought was so interesting. Number one, he's talking about the question, this has been a great question asked by many, many people, why do we continue to test? Why is the push to test and test and test and test? Why? If it were the bubonic plague, if it were so contagious that anyone who's ever come across it, if they even, bump into somebody else, they're going to end up killing 10 people, we'd have a different situation. But that's not where we are. The numbers aren't there. There was never the numbers that were originally forecast, and even when the original forecasts were dropped down, we never got to those numbers. But we have in the testing arena, the testing thing, where you had so many, especially on the left, saying, oh, we have to test, the goal is test, and America is failing its citizens because we don't test enough people. Test. Well, people, if you're feeling healthy, if you've not been exposed to anyone who has COVID, what is the reason to take the test? I mean, you can if you want to, it's a free country, but why would the government be arm twisting people into getting tested? And think of the absurdity about testing. If you test, if I tested today and they said, yep, negative, you're fine. And then tomorrow I went to the grocery store with my mask on and somebody else in mask on, but we got too close and somehow I came into contact with the COVID virus, I could test positive the very next day. The test is only as good, only lasts as long as to the time period you walk out of the testing place, because after that, you're in life. You're out there engaging in life, and you may come across this virus. The testing thing was a push in the beginning, kind of in a panic, saying everybody has to test, but has given the left, it's given the media, the Democrat media mob in this country, the ammo to say, okay, we have bad headlines, we have bad news. Look at these new numbers. Now we have all these new tests, and we have tests that are positive. Look at these numbers. So you have massive testing, a certain percentage testing positive, even though the vast majority of those people testing positive aren't sick, don't feel sick, don't need a hospital bed, definitely don't need an ICU bed. They're going to ride it out at home and join the 99% of people who get through COVID and survive with no problem. You have people testing positive who are not sick. But every time you get a new headline that says, oh my gosh, X number of new cases, it justifies the tyranny-prone local officials to say, oh my gosh, now we have X number of new positive test cases, X number of new cases. They're not saying sick people. Cases are not sick people. Cases are people who went in, got a test, and they might feel fine, and they may be asymptomatic the entire time. Asymptomatic the whole time they have this, they go through, if they do develop COVID, they may be asymptomatic. They may have a slightly sore throat. They may have a few symptoms. The point is, the testing craze has fed the tyranny. The testing craze fed the tyranny. And on top of that, the CDC, the actual Center for Disease Control, usually pushing, just everything that the leftists want them to push, but the CDC actually came out with new advice. Somehow I don't see this, splashed around the headlines around this country, but the CDC just came out with new guidelines saying, considerations on who should be tested. People who don't feel good. That's the answer. They're no longer saying everybody get tested, run out to get tested. They put new guidelines out, I think it was Monday, put new guidelines out. The people who should be tested, people who have symptoms of COVID-19. So if you have symptoms, you don't feel well. People who've had close contact within 6 feet of a person for at least 15 minutes who has COVID-19. So if I went to visit someone who had COVID-19 and I got within 6 feet of them, and then I hung around for 20 minutes and I knew they had it, which I don't know why anyone would do that, then you should be tested. So they're not even CDC is pointing out, there's no reason for all this testing. We need to knock it off. Now I must tell you, CDC came out with this on Monday, and you gotta believe that the COVID supremacists, the ones using COVID to get control of this society, to attack President Trump, to use it as a club over his head, as a fall election issue, because we still have X new cases, because we have, whatever number it is, of days that he should have done something this sooner, should have done that sooner. All the new cases are just ammo for the leftists to go after Trump, claim he somehow mishandled it in the beginning, even though it was Trump who shut down travel to America. Trump shut it down, traveled to America from China at the time that Biden was calling that xenophobic, just to be clear, of who's actually looking out. Trump tried to do what he could. The left and the media can always find some reason to say, well, he could have done this, he should have said this, he failed to do this, forever and a day. And people who don't stay informed and only read left-wing sources actually believe that somehow Biden was on top of it and Trump wasn't, when exactly the opposite is true. But CDC now saying, you really shouldn't bother getting tested. Or their third category, who should get tested, besides those who have symptoms or those who have come into contact with someone who's tested positive, and you hang around for 15 minutes and get within 6 feet of them for 15 minutes. Why you would do that is unclear. If you knew they had COVID, you wouldn't do it. But you have that. And then the third category is people who've been asked or referred to get testing by their healthcare provider, which is not really a category. It's just saying if your healthcare provider says to do it. So first of all, Steve Moore's newsletter is pointing this out, that the testing thing is just it's just another vehicle to be clobbered by the left. And of course, leftists are saying, the CDC, oh my gosh, you can't be saying that. Other big news in his Unleash Prosperity thing, that there's now more and more studies talking about the idea that on COVID, the lockdowns were overly blunt and costly. The lockdowns were overly blunt and costly. Let me tell you what they say about that. Just a few numbers. Because we shut the world down in response to this, Wuhan Chinese Communist Party virus. Over 400 million jobs have been lost worldwide. 400 million jobs lost. It's not like there's no cost to this shutdown. 400 million jobs lost, 13 million of those in the U.S. alone. You had global output on track to fall 5%, which is far worse than the worst financial crisis, according to the International Monetary Fund. You also had the lockdowns where they're politically difficult to keep in place for long to stamp out the virus, and that the evidence now is pointing out alternative strategies could slow the spread of the epidemic at much less costs. And here's a quote I want you to remember. James Stock, Harvard University economist, who along with Harvard epidemiologist Michael Mina and others is modeling how to avoid a surge in deaths without a deeply damaging lockdown. His quote, "We are on the cusp of an economic catastrophe." Please let that sink in. People all the time look back and point to the Great Depression, the harm that flowed to America, and the damage to America's economy. And look what happened to America because we did all these things. We overreacted to this virus. People look back at the Depression era and say, look at the harm that happened to America. This is worse, and this is self-inflicted. This is voluntary government policy, shutting America down, hurting the American people, hurting the economy. So you have James Stock, Harvard University economist, we are on the cusp of economic catastrophe. We can avoid the worst of that catastrophe by being disciplined. We don't need to shut down again. And you have to understand, Dr. Fauci is always floating. Well, new test numbers, new numbers may have to go back to a shutdown. Now, I know President Trump has said we're not doing a shutdown again. Thank God he said that. But you have people around the country, governors, mayors, elected officials, especially in blue states, waiting for some encouragement from Fauci, some justification from Fauci to go ahead and shut their states down again. Go ahead, because all the economic damage they do hurts the economy, and they blame it all on President Trump. And didn't he, because 6 months ago he could have done X, he did Y instead. All these concocted lies about it. And this is really, really important stuff. This is the kind of information you get out of the Unleash Prosperity thing. I'll share one other thing that came out of it today, and that has to do with Sweden. And it's a really interesting thing because America goes back and forth and back and forth. The world, in discussing COVID, goes back and forth about Sweden. On the one hand, Sweden didn't want to lock down. Sweden just said, we're just not up for this. We're not up for the lockdown thing. So they developed herd immunity after refusing to lock down. Now, some experts are saying they're at herd immunity. Others are saying, it's a bit of a ways off. We're getting close. But the point is this concept of herd immunity, the way our systems fight off viruses normally, is because we come into contact with them. Our bodies come into contact with them, we have the virus, and our body's natural immune system kicks in and fights the virus. And once our body's natural immune system kicks in and destroys the virus, then you have people they get over the disease, they get over the virus, whatever it is, and then they are immune. That's how the immune system works. Herd immunity's idea is if you go ahead and let a lot of people get exposed to coronavirus, they're going to have people getting over it, and then having, if the majority, and there are all sorts of tabulations and numbers that I've gone through in a show when I had an expert. I'm not going to do it here, but the idea of it is if enough people get exposed to it and they overcome it with their natural immune system, then they are immune, and you get herd immunity, meaning that happens in a certain percentage of the population, and then pretty soon you're not in danger anymore because most of the people have immunity because their system got exposed to it. It's one of the many reasons that some of the doctors in the very beginning of this whole disaster were talking about the idea that we were actually hurting ourselves by quarantining the healthy. Because when you quarantine the healthy, when you make healthy people stay home, they don't come into the normal day of way life is, the normal conduct of life, where you come into contact with viruses, and the normal, as you live your life, you go outside, you go to the mall, you go to the store, you go for a walk, you go places, you go to meetings, you come into contact with viruses. This is how your immune system develops strength. It's why when your kids were little and they're babies and they get a cold, and the mom, especially your first kid, you're like, oh my gosh, little Joey has a cold. And the doctors say, actually, it's good for him. This is how he's building the strength of his immune system. When we quarantined everybody, forcing them to stay home, we suppressed the immune system. Not only did we not enable people to come in contact with the virus, especially the vast majority of people who'd be perfectly fine. If they came into contact with it, they may get sick. It's not wonderful. You could use one of the many treatments we have available, and some need to go to the hospital, but you would develop immunity. When you stay home, you not only don't come into contact with this, but your immune system becomes suppressed because your body isn't using it, because you're not coming into contact with anything. So back to this. So Sweden decided not doing it. We're just not going to do this shutdown the rest of the world's going to do. They say they're close to herd immunity. Some people saying, well, they're not that close, but they're doing. In fact, they have, I'll read a couple great quotes. Arne Elofsson, professor in biometrics at Stockholm University, thinks the population has developed a form of immunity. Strict rules do not work as people seem to break them. Sweden is doing fine. Also, another person, epidemiologist Anders Tegnell, points out, and he was helping manage Sweden's pandemic response. He points out, masks give a false sense of security. The belief that masks can solve our problem is very, very dangerous. So, the Prime Minister of Sweden, Stefan Löfven, thinks voluntary social distancing. So you don't arrest people, you don't fine them, as they were trying to do in New York City and other places, and some states are talking about that. But Prime Minister Stefan Löfven says voluntary social distancing rules and not closing schools, but banning gatherings of more than 50 people is the right approach. Quite a few people think we were right. Anyway, they didn't shut down their schools, they didn't shut down their country, and they're doing well, and they're moving beyond the danger zone of countries that had a more strict lockdown policy. There are more things in this I want to share with you today, but I'm going to run out of time. I want to encourage you, if you don't get it, to get Steve Moore's Unleashed Prosperity email. And it just is loaded with information every time. Okay, one last topic for today I want to hit, and this has to do with Jacob, with this episode that happened in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I mentioned it a little bit in the show yesterday, and I want to just I want to lay out some really serious points about this. In our country, we certainly have had, everyone understands, we had a history of slavery. We had a history of segregation. We had a history of Jim Crow laws. We had a history of the Ku Klux Klan. We had a history in the South, especially the Democrat-run South, and the Ku Klux Klan being the military arm of the Democrat Party. That's what it was. We had horrific treatment of Black Americans, from slavery to segregation to having the Jim Crow laws in place to having KKK. I mean, we had a very alarming racial history in our country, and everyone should know about it, and everyone should understand that. However, we are now in the year 2020. We had the Civil Rights Movement. We had the Civil War, 1865, that ends, slavery's ended. We had the Civil Rights Acts 100 years later, the Civil Rights Movement. We had the Civil Rights Acts come into being, Title VII, saying, you can't discriminate in employment and public accommodation based on race, sex, national origin, and all of that. So we've moved forward. We move forward as a country, and we have in this country continued to try to correct the errors, the sins of the past. But I want you to really think about just this incident, by the way, in Kenosha, Wisconsin. They are investigating. I'm sure we're going to find out more details. The very quick summary of it was, in case a lot of you probably saw the video that was online, but it involved a young man, Jacob Blake, who was, the story went, the police got a call to a domestic dispute. So police get a call. They're not patrolling the streets looking for someone to harm, like the left tries to claim. They get a call, there's a domestic disturbance. The police show up. What's unknown is all that happened in there, except some people involved say that this guy, Jacob Blake, was trying to break up an argument between two women, a very high volume and very angry argument between two women. So he was trying to do something good, it appears, as the story goes. But he's trying to break that up. So when the police get there, there's some interaction. There's an interaction where the police they have Jacob Blake. They are trying to talk to him. He's fighting them. You have several police officers trying to hold him down to talk to him. It's unclear what happened, and I believe we all have to know what happened. America will know what happened, but the police were at some talking, questioning, whatever they were doing. Jacob Blake wasn't cooperating. He was fighting back and trying to get away. So then someone across the street has a phone. Everyone has a camera on their phone now, taking a video. Someone turns on the phone, and Jacob Blake is trying to get away from the officers and get around the back to the driver's door of his van. He had three young boys, his sons, in the van. He's trying to get in. A police officer is grabbing the back of his shirt and basically saying, "Stop resisting." I read somewhere that there's a video, you can hear them saying, "Stop fighting and stop resisting." I don't know if that's true, but in any case, they're grabbing on his shirt, trying to stop him from getting in the van. He's still trying to get away from the police and get in the van, and the police fired a gun. And so he was shot 3 times, I think, or he was shot numerous times. And so then obviously he goes down, he falls down, the police are administering first aid, he goes off to the hospital. The reports, at least the last report I heard, is that he suffered an injury to his spinal cord and is paralyzed from the waist down. No matter what else you want to say about anything about this story, a horrific outcome for a young man with 3 sons, a young and healthy guy. I think he was 29 or 31 or something in that age range. And he, at least as of now, it appears paralyzed from the waist down over some interaction. So that video naturally goes viral. Someone puts it up on Twitter, goes viral. Everyone, or probably Instagram, wherever they put it up, everyone sees it. So what people see is him trying to get in the van, the police grabbing onto him and trying to stop him. And then that you hear the pops of the gun. It's a horrible thing to watch. I don't even want to play it on this show because it's horrible to watch someone get shot, and horrible that this injury may have been, this permanent injury may have occurred to him. But everything I just told you are the facts as we know them now. The police department immediately suspended the officers involved, and they are acknowledging they are investigating. So police are investigating. Instantly, and most unfortunately, the governor of Wisconsin, before any investigation has happened, before anyone understands all the facts, whatever it was that led up to the police officers trying to stop him from getting in the van, the governor of Wisconsin weighs in condemning the police officers' actions. And so you get a lot of people saying, wait a minute, you don't even know what happened. Why don't you wait to what you know what the facts are? And it is true that at the time he issued it, and even as of today, we don't know all the facts. But the governor weighs in, on the side of saying the police, too much police brutality, very harsh words, very harsh language denouncing the police. So then the chief of police weighs in Kenosha and says, hey, you know what? You don't even know yet what happened. Why don't you wait and find out the facts? These officers have been suspended. We're investigating. And I'm sure the investigation is going to either eventually be done by state level people or maybe even by federal level people. You have to have a thorough investigation for an incident like this. Now that I've laid out that background, what I want to say about that is this. There is tremendous tension in this country, racial tension already. And, whether it flows from the George Floyd incident in Minneapolis, which, again, appeared to be very bad conduct by the officers. And again, in that case, prosecution is impending or may have begun. The officers are being charged, and they're going to prosecute them. And so you have that kind of incident, but you have also, in this country, many incidents in which the police are killed by citizens. You have, in fact, that statistic that Heather McDonald had at one point. In fact, I'm not going to quote it because I don't have it in front of me. But police are also in grave danger of being shot by civilians. We're all the time seeing stories of police officers being killed by civilians. And so, there's a lot of tension out there. There's a lot of tension between the Black Lives Matter movement, black populations, especially inner cities. Kenosha has had its share of problems with the police. Apparently, past stories also causing people who live in Kenosha to say there's police brutality, unjustified, racism, and I don't know all those incidents. I mean, I could dive in and read all those stories, but people in Kenosha say this is not a new problem. This has been a recurring problem. They're very quick to condemn the police. So Kenosha explodes in riots. As I mentioned yesterday in the show, they had massive riots. So they had, of course, and I have a friend who lives in Kenosha who's been sending pictures Kenosha is kind of a, it's podunk. I mean, whatever word you use. It's not it's not Malibu, it's not Hollywood, it's Kenosha, Wisconsin. So, but they have, everyday common Joe America lives there. I mean, people who are just salt of the earth Americans and who are not part of normally part of a big radical political movement. But in Kenosha, they've had riots. And so they had citizens who are showing up armed defending their own businesses, saying, you know what, you're not going to burn down my business. You're not going to loot my business. So you have armed citizens standing up against the protesters and you can't even call it, they've become rioters now, standing up against the rioters defending their property. You had a shooting in one of these instances in which somebody in the crowd of people defending businesses opened fire at the protesters, 2 killed, 1 injured, and that happens to be a minor, a 17-year-old kid who was arrested, apparently was a shooter in that incident. And so you have a cauldron, you have riots happening, you have the governor has to call in the National Guard, you have President Trump saying, yeah, we can send in the troops, you got to put this down. And I got to say, people, nobody on either side of the political aisle, nobody who loves this country wants to see this happening in our country. Nobody. Nobody wants innocent Americans shot by police officers. Nobody wants to have businesses burning. Nobody wants to have rioters looting, destroying, just engaged in property destruction and instilling fear in the people and causing, of course, people are going to move out. The businesses are going to move out of Kenosha. The people who live in those areas, they're going to move out. And so we haven't really accomplished anything. And I wanted to lay all that out to say that there was I mentioned yesterday on the show, there was a reaction almost immediately from LeBron James. LeBron James did a little video. I don't have it ready to play, but LeBron James did a little video. And in his video, which he put up on social media, he basically said, and he said on his ESPN, in fact, ESPN tweeted it out. ESPN's Twitter feed, if you want to go to it, at ESPN, LeBron James talking, saying, we are scared as black people in America. Black men, black women, black kids, we are terrified. And he shared that message about this shooting of Jacob Blake. And LeBron James, as you likely know, he is just about he's the be all and end all. If you are a basketball fan, King James, he's the guy, he's a great, great, great player. Willing to weigh in on this before the facts are known, based on whatever that was, 45-second video taken across the street by someone who had a phone camera, which is not the same as knowing all of what happened in the instant leading up to it. Now, I'm the first to say, this one doesn't look good. It may turn out, as you know all the facts, that the shooting is not as unjustified as it seems. The shooting seems unjustified right now. But for the same reason that we should not instantaneously conclude based on one video that this is another example of police brutality, another example of racism, another example of what a horrible racist country we live in, we also should not accept the idea that because police officers did it, that we, the conservatives, who are always trying to defend the police instead of defund the police, we've got to be willing to say, you know what? It matters what happened. It matters a lot what happened. And we need a thorough investigation. And if something was done that wasn't right, wasn't justified, we have to look into it. We have to potentially prosecute these officers involved. If their prosecution is justified, we have to look at the training in this department. We may need to change out the training procedures, change out the police chief, change out a lot of things. It matters. We can't get to a good place in this country just by going to our corners of, we support the police and we hate the police. We can't get anywhere with that. And I think there are more and more voices saying, let's all calm down. Let's listen to what the facts are. Let's let the investigation happen. And when the investigation's done, then we'll decide what action should be taken. But LeBron James is willing to pounce without the facts. And this has been very harmful because once he tweets that out and he goes out saying what he said, this seems to legitimize or justify the riots, the destruction of property, the burning of buildings, burning of churches, burning of cars, looting, all of that. People are saying is justified because, in part, because LeBron James told them, yeah, this is another bad shooting. And we don't know that yet. It's another reason why I really, really like Melania Trump's talk during the RNC when she was saying, we've all got to take a deep breath. We've all got to try to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. We've all got to decide that we're going to, to calm down, stop destroying property in the name of justice, put yourself in someone's shoes. else's shoes. Don't ever judge others by, don't judge others based on their skin color, race, or ethnicity. Treat them as human beings, as fellow Americans. We've really got to strive for that, because I want to tie my political point in this segment of the show is the left is using, in this country, the Marxist left that has taken over the Democrat Party, taken over the Democrat Party. There is no moderate Democrat Party left. There's a Marxist agenda. The communist, Marxist, socialist agenda has taken over the Democrat Party, and they use race to divide America. They consciously use race to push Marxism. So leftists, as you saw at the Democrat convention, nobody's willing to condemn the violence. Nobody will say a word about it, because the leftists who want to win office in this election, they need this violence in the streets. They need to have people riled up. They cannot criticize Marxism. They can't criticize the Marxists who are the driving force behind the Black Lives Matter movement. Yes, individual Black lives matter, and so does everyone else's life matter. But the movement itself, the organization itself, Black Lives Matter, radically Marxist, very directionally, very intentionally determined to bring down this country, to push us toward Marxism, and they use race to get there. I don't think LeBron James wants this, wants the Marxist agenda. He agrees Black Lives Matter. He's not thinking, I want a Marxist takeover of America. He's not thinking that. He's thinking, I don't like seeing black men shot. And I keep reading in the headlines and hearing in the news that there's a massive problem of police brutality and racism. And so I'm going to get out there and weigh in. But he's actually assisting the Black Lives Matter Marxist agenda by weighing in when he doesn't know what the facts are. And this is not to say, by the way, I started out this little segment talking about we have had, obviously, huge racial issues in our country. Another thing Melania Trump acknowledged, we have portions of our history nobody's proud of. Portions of our history we want to do better. We don't want to be like that anymore. No one's claiming America's history is perfect. Everyone understands we've had challenges in the past along the lines of race. But what LeBron James does when he chimes in before he knows the story is he ends up feeding the Black Lives Matter Marxist violence in this country, and especially because no one knows the facts yet, totally unjustified. So on LeBron James, I'll tell you, he actually got a little bit of, in fact, more than a little bit of pushback, which is really, really good. Which I appreciate. Someone was willing to speak up and say that. So you had, for example, Outkicks Jason Whitlock. And he responded when LeBron James did his video saying, I'm scared, I'm terrified, Black America is terrified. Jason Whitlock said, I'm Black, I'm not scared, I'm not terrified. Neither is LeBron James. He's lying. He and the political activists controlling him want Black people to immerse themselves in fear. Fear is a tool used to control people. If you comply with police instructions, there's virtually no chance of an American citizen being harmed by police. I'll repeat that last line. This is a Black citizen, prominent Black citizen, Outkicks Jason Whitlock. If you comply with police instructions, there's virtually no chance of an American citizen being harmed. It's important to understand that, because that's a message very much better coming from Jason Whitlock, a Black American, than made by others. But there are many Black conservatives making this point. Whatever else happened, and whatever else drove this whole event, this incident that got started, Jacob Black, you can see, is refusing to comply with the officers who are saying, stop resisting. He wants to get away from them, whatever reason he had. At least that point is a fair point in terms of defense of the police. So then on top of that, longtime civil rights attorney Leo Terrell, only recently having left the liberal plantation where he had lived for years, he became not only a conservative, but a Trump supporter. He had a few words of response to LeBron James too. He says, please stay quiet. This is Leo Terrell. Please stay quiet. You have absolutely no facts whatsoever to speak about the shooting. may I suggest you have a conversation with Herschel Walker and Senator Tim Scott. So this is Leo Terrell. You can find his tweet at the Leo Terrell. And I'm getting around to make this point. I do this show to speak up for the goodness, the greatness, the uniqueness, the extraordinary greatness of America. I believe in this country and the people. I don't believe America is perfect. I do believe we always can be improving. We can always find a path forward. We can always find a way. We have to love our neighbors as ourselves. We have to respect our neighbors. We have to put ourselves in their shoes, as Melania Trump is saying. We have to think through the perspective they would have. And I will say, in terms of this guy, Jacob Black, not complying with the police, I'm well aware. I have many friends, Black moms, who talk about how frightened they are of their own sons, their own young adult Black sons, having interactions with the police, very alarmed that their sons might be harmed by the police. They have, the talk with their sons where they talk about, when an officer stops you, keep your hands on the steering wheel. If you're told to get your driver's license, you have to say, I need to move my right hand to get over to the glove box. These kinds of things, I've heard many Black moms talk to me about it, about the idea that they fear for their sons' lives. I'm not saying that fear is irrational either. I think there is, historically, a reason many Black Americans fear the police. But you have to ask yourself, how do we move forward? Making policies, improving America, making better decisions, making better cities and better police departments and a better country. If we continue to judge people by the color of their skin, if we continue to make assumptions about what happened in the past is happening now, if we are willing to issue a natural, it's not, I will say to LeBron James, he didn't issue a call to arms, but he may as well have. Once he got out there saying this and had other of his left-wing allies repeating it, then you had a leftist rising up revolt, and no one even knew what the facts were. And we can't get anywhere in this country, including trying to make America better. We can't do that if everyone's riled up based on ignorance or based on lies. The fact is, LeBron James doesn't know what happened yet in Kenosha. All of us will know. I'll be the first to say if that shooting was unjustified, if there was no basis for it, first to say prosecute those police officers. Look into the training in that department. Consider replacing the police chief or maybe the whole department, whatever it takes. But we have to have police. We have to have the rule of law. We have to have law and order. And we cannot get anywhere when we have a LeBron James essentially issuing a call to arms, and then you have mobs in the streets, burning churches, burning buildings, destroying property, which then in turn causes people to form militias, and then a young man shooting protesters, whatever that guy is obviously facing and should face criminal charges. He's been charged with homicide, and he should be if he intentionally shot into the crowd. We can do better than this as Americans. We are better than this. We're better than this in terms of solving our problems without resorting to the hysteria and the violence that the left refuses to condemn. When the leftists won't condemn it, they are condoning it. When conservatives like Melania Trump, speaking on behalf of the Trump administration, saying, we got to try to listen to each other, we got to try to do better, we have to and we have to put ourselves in our neighbor's shoes, and kind of wrapping up the show and tying back the discussion we had about the RNC versus the DNC we've been talking about all week. The RNC's message, including the pardon of John Ponder, including the story shared at the RNC about John Ponder in prison for his third felony and having committed armed robbery, and now being out of prison in the public eye, creating an organization to help people who get out of prison, help them find a path forward, help them find a way back into American society. That is the real America. Donald Trump going out to speak with them last February, before we ever had the George Floyd incident, before we had Kenosha, you had Trump flying out to Las Vegas to talk to this group to say, we want you back in society. We embrace your presence. We want to help you find your way. That is the real America. That's the America to vote for. The America that has law and order, but also has mercy and tries to find a way to help people redeem their lives. This is the contrast between what the Republican Party is offering and what the Democrat Party seems to be offering America. As we wrap up this week, RNC versus DNC, wrap up the RNC, the Democrat Party seems to be the constant stirring of the racial pot, keeping people, as LeBron James did. And maybe, as I said yesterday, maybe he doesn't even realize he's being played. Maybe he's not lying, as that Outkick guy said, or as I guess Leo Terrell said. No, the Outkick guy said, maybe he's not lying. Maybe he just thinks that really is true. But the fact is, he's a national voice. He needs to be the advocate for people saying, I want to know the facts before I'm willing to pass judgment. We'll probably talk about this case more, but I'm out of time today. And so, as I do at the close of every show, we'll tell you why the stories we talked about today matter to you. So we started today talking about the COVID, no success allowed. We have HCQ, COVID treatment success. Hydroxychloroquine, we have budesonide, COVID treatment success. Oleandrin, COVID treatment success. Blood plasma, advocated by mainstream media for months, and now COVID treatment, and yet mainstream media coverage of all. Dangerous, unproven, irresponsible. Scientists doubt. If Trump says it's good, now true of both hydroxychloroquine and plasma, media says bad. Americans sense it. There is an agenda at work, and it's not about helping sick people. Once Americans realize their fear is being gamed and manipulated, the pandemic will be over, and no leftist official can prolong it any further. And the other story, we're going to have to skip in our Why It Matters to You. I did not do a slide related to our Unleash Prosperity and the testing news from CDC that says you only should be tested for COVID if you're sick or exposed. We'll skip a slide on that today, but the other slide I did for today, ending up the show, Kenosha, LeBron, Terrell, and facts. Remember Melania Trump's message, take a deep breath, wait for the full facts, put yourself in the other people's shoes before judging anything. Kenosha does not have to be seen as a black versus white incident. Americans of all points of the political spectrum support justice and abhor injustice, regardless of skin color. The ignorant pouncing by Wisconsin governor and LeBron James without knowing even half the facts causes real harm. Police are defamed, enforcement declines, and then comes defunding. Innocent citizens will not just let their businesses and homes be destroyed. Militias are formed, defensive actions are taken, casualties are incurred. Civic destruction and violence must end. Ignorant, instantaneous defense of or attack on police both hurt America. And that, my very fine friends, is my show for today. I want to urge you to go to our website, americacanwetalk.org. You can subscribe to my newsletter. You can donate to keep this show on air. Donate to help support this show. And I'll remind you again, I'm hosting a conference in Dallas on Saturday, September 26th, American Women and American Freedom. Fabulous lineup of speakers, great energy, great passion for defending the future of freedom. I'd love for you to come. You can email me at americacanwetalk@gmail.com, and I'll tell you more about it. And wrapping up today, I'll say thank you again for tuning in to America Can We Talk, where I always talk truth about America because America matters. And I'll talk to you next time.
America Can We Talk? Truth about America.
Can you